Deja vu? A British Prime Minister wrangling with the EU to get a better deal? Is Keir Starmer just tying up loose ends? Or are we creeping back to the European bloc? Well, Nick Thomas-Symonds, who's been the government's negotiator with the EU, is with us live alongside Alex Burghart from the Conservatives. The boss of energy giant Centrica tells us they'll have to close a vital facility in the North Sea unless the government steps in.
So what you see here will be shut down, and we'll remove everything that we've got here. We'll make it like it was never here, and we'll lose this resilience.
And a government of losers. Legend Sir Elton John tells us ministers have got it all wrong when it comes to protecting talent against tech.
You've got to rob young people of their legacy and their income. It's a criminal offence, I think. I think the government are just being absolute losers, and I'm very angry about it, as you can tell.
Say what you mean, Elton. And our team at the decks for the next hour this week: radio host Supreme Nick Ferrari, Labour MP and Dr Rosanna Aline Khan, and Callum Miller, the Lib Dems Foreign Affairs spokesperson. Morning. It's a busy old day, so let's start with the big headlines. Several of the papers splash on the Prime Minister's big European moment tomorrow. The Observer's looking forward to the summit warmly. The Mail on Sunday's warning of betrayal. Who'd have thunk it? Such different approaches. The Sunday Times has hints about the defence review in a couple of weeks' time, but it says part of the EU deal will cut passport queues. The Sunday Telegraph, though, is flagging concern about what the deal might mean for migration numbers. Here at the BBC, we're running the incredible story of this tall ship owned by the Mexican Navy that sailed right into the Brooklyn Bridge. 2 people died in that crash and many more were injured. And while we're on air, the new Pope, Leo XIV, is going through the stunning formalities of taking on the job in Rome. There he is, greeting thousands in the Pope-mobile for the first time. And that 2-hour ceremony and plenty of coverage will be across the BBC for much of the day. This is the scene live inside the Vatican as that 2-hour ceremony gets underway. Well then, welcome to all three of you. Let's get into our main theme today, this EU summit. Big moment, big day in London for the Prime Minister. Nick, what do you think the political risk is for Keir Starmer?
Considerable, because let's face it, Brexit was the divorce. And now we're at the situation where we're going to our kids' weddings and christenings and we want to be able to get on. And that is the reality. There are many things at play. Sir Keir has got to be aware that there is still this sense of people who are very angry. They felt that Brexit was never properly delivered, that they still... But I think, to borrow a phrase from last night, he'd better be careful because this is taking place on Monday. And those who voted Brexit, they could say, Remember Monday, what the hell just happened? They do not want to see... I'm not necessarily on the same page as the Mail on Sunday, and I'm not on the same page as the Observer. Let's just be grown up. Let's try and put together a deal that allows holidaymakers watching this show now, when they want to go to their holiday to Spain, they want to go to Italy, they want to go to France, where they're not sort of literally at the back of the queue. But the last point before I yield is let's be very careful about sensitive totemic issues such as fish. A tiny bit of the economy, but hugely emotional.
So that's the risk. What's the opportunity, Rosanna?
I think it's a really exciting opportunity. As the chair of the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Europe, I was in Brussels just a few weeks ago, and there was a real sense of willingness to work with the UK government, particularly because Keir Starmer came out very strong on defence. I think it would be churlish of us not to seize opportunities to forge closer ties with our allies, allies who are some of our biggest trading partners, those with whom we have shared security threats. I'm really clear on this. Keir Starmer has said, much as I would like to rejoin the EU, that is not happening. Mm-hmm. This is about creating a sensible working relationship with our closest allies.
The Lib Dems, though, do want the Prime Minister to go further, do they not? And Callum, I should say, niche trivia, that we are distantly related. That's irrelevant to our discussions, but for the Lib Dems, you are the party also with the Greens, pushing quite hard for the Prime Minister to do more here, aren't you?
You're right. We think this is a really important opportunity. We welcome the steps that this government has taken to move things forward, but particularly in light of the changed circumstances of Donald Trump's White House, it's even more important that the UK renews a strong relationship with the EU on security and on the economy. And that's why we are hoping that this will be the start of some really ambitious commitments to bring the UK back and closer to our European partners.
OK, well, we'll hear from the negotiator for the UK in just a couple of minutes. But if you are more interested in Eurovision than the European summit, perish the thought, you'll probably know that in the spectacular final last night, it came down to a close-run thing. In the end, the winner, you can see them waiting nervously, was the Austrians. Jubilation all round. And later in the show, I'm pleased to say we'll have the inside track from Sophie Ellis-Bextor, who was busy giving the UK verdicts last night. But back to the summit. Brexit became such a toxic word for the Tories and a notion that many Labour politicians didn't really want to touch, as the public's frustration with years of bitterness and barracking-consumed politics for so long. Keir Starmer, though, wants to turn the page. As we speak, European ambassadors are still thrashing out the details. And the UK's negotiator, Nick Thomas-Symonds, the minister, is taking a break from the last-minute haggling to join us this morning. So we're grateful to you for coming in on a busy day. Let's start then for just, if you're watching at home, what difference do you hope the deal will make in people's everyday lives?
Well, good morning, Laura, first of all, and very good to join you. We are in the very final hours of this negotiation. We're negotiating hard in the national interest. And what we'd like to deliver tomorrow, our objectives tomorrow, are a deal that is going to work for jobs here in the UK, that is going to lower household bills, and is going to give us stronger borders. That is what we are trying to do. We are not looking back to the battles of the past. We are looking at the situation that the United Kingdom finds itself in the mid-2020s on the international stage. We've been putting Britain back on the international stage, trade deals with India, trade deals with the United States, and now we want to deliver that arrangement with the European Union, a new strategic partnership that works for the British people.
And we know you want to go for the hat-trick, and I know you can't give us all the details, but in brass tacks, where can you tell us you are confident? Are you confident that British travellers, as Nick was suggesting, will be able to use e-gates with their passports instead of being stuck in queues for hours at European airports?
Look, I am certainly pushing for people to be able to go through far more quickly. I think we could all agree that not being stuck in queues and having more time to spend, whether it's on holiday or work trips, having more time to do what you want, not being stuck in queues, I'm sure we could all agree that that would be a very sensible
so that was a
objective.
smile. So I'm going to take it from that. You're quite confident you'll get that. What about bringing bills down, food prices down in supermarkets? We know you've promised before that you would be able to make progress on the complicated arrangements that we don't have to go into to make this easier for exports and imports. Are you confident that will have an impact in supermarkets?
Well, supermarkets themselves have written to myself as the lead UK negotiator, and indeed have written to the EU, urging us to make progress. This is an area at the moment where the current deal just isn't working. We know we've had lorries waiting for 16 hours, fresh food in the back not able to be exported because, frankly, it's just going off, red tape, all the certifications that are required. We absolutely want to reduce that.
Are you confident you'll be able to do that, at least in some way?
Listen, we are confident, but as I say, nothing is agreed until everything is agreed. But we promised in our manifesto last year that we were elected on that we would be seeking that agreement across agricultural products to help our farmers export their excellent produce, but also across food and drink.
OK.
And that's something we've been negotiating very hard for.
OK, so you do sound confident on passport queues and you do sound confident on being able to improve food prices. Will it be easier for European young people to come and live and work and study in the UK and vice versa? Because some people are excited about this, some people are anxious about this, that unless you can reassure them today that people coming here would be tightly limited with perhaps a time or a cap on the numbers, then people will feel you've let them down. That is betraying what they voted for in Brexit.
Well, absolutely not. It's about a smart and controlled scheme. And as of today, we have already 13 youth mobility schemes with other countries. Nobody is remotely suggesting that is freedom of movement with those countries. It absolutely isn't. And that is a red line for us, by the way. We've said we won't go back to the single market, we won't go back to the customs union, we won't go back to freedom of movement. That is the mandate we were elected on.
But does smart
That's the mandate
and
we'll
controlled
deliver.
mean a time limit and a cap on numbers? Is that the translation of that in brass tacks?
Well, listen, it is not going to be in the British national interest for me to start negotiating this across your show. Important though your show is, Laura, in the final hours.
But what does
certainly-
smart and controlled mean? Because you're using that phrase.
Absolutely, and that is what I've said. And that control element is hugely important. I know how important it is. But just to go back to your earlier point about young Europeans, it's about young British people as well, having opportunities to be able to work, to live, to experience different cultures. But that control is hugely important. And it will be absolutely consistent with the objective the government set out in its migration white paper last week to reduce... Let me finish this point, it's important. It is to reduce the level of net migration. That is the objective we set out last week. Net migration quadrupled between 2019 and 2023 to nearly 1 million. We've said that is way too high. So anything agreed on youth mobility will be consistent with lowering the level of net migration
But how's that
across this
possible when
parliament.
you're going to allow more people in? I mean, even if it's just for 1 year or 2 years, that's still going to add to the total, unless you do what some ministers have previously called for and said students don't count in the overall migration statistics.
No, that's not what
That's off the table.
that's not what is intended. This is an area of our national debate, immigration, where the previous government, by promising to get the numbers down to tens of thousands and never doing it, completely destroyed trust in the system. We've set out the different restrictions that we are going to introduce, for example, on skill levels, that people come... We still want to attract the brightest and the best, but the skill level of people coming in has to be at degree level. We are ending the care visa, we are making those restrictions. So anything agreed, and I stress this is in sensitive final hours, will be consistent with reducing the level of net migration as we've promised.
If you want to get the goodies that you would like from the EU, everybody remembers that the EU is very good at driving a hard bargain. Do you admit that to get some of the goodies you want, we'll have to follow more EU rules in some areas?
Well, both sides are driving a hard bargain. I've been driven by ruthless pragmatism throughout this process. In relation to standards, which you're referring to, Laura, we, first of all, will not compromise on our high standards. That's exactly what we did in the US deal. What we are looking to do, we don't come at this from an ideological perspective. We come from a practical perspective where it is in our national interest to align on common standards, to make sure we get far easier trade, to mean that businesses that, frankly, have had to stop trading with the EU because of the red tape can start trading with the EU again, but also ensuring the businesses that are currently trading across the channel, but they're facing all these barriers.
But to do that will mean having to follow EU standards. It might be pragmatic, as you suggest, but that will mean having to follow more EU rules to make it happen.
It means taking a sovereign choice as to the standards, the common standards we wish to align to. That's what we did in the US deal, where we wouldn't compromise on our food standards. And it's exactly that same pragmatic approach for jobs and growth here in this country we're taking in this negotiation.
So you will follow EU standards if it makes sense?
If
it makes sense, that's what you're saying.
It's about sovereign choices that we are making. We are a high standards jurisdiction, so is the EU. It's about pragmatic choices to make sure that businesses can trade more easily and we can drive growth. Good for people's jobs, good for people's living standards.
And will the UK contribute more money to EU schemes if we want to participate in them?
With EU schemes, we take an approach of ruthlessly assessing value for money. So, for example, the previous government took a decision that they would pay in...
I'm asking you what you will do. Is it worth paying more money into various schemes in order to have membership?
Well, this is what is happening at the moment already.
And is more of it going to happen?
The previous government took a decision which we supported in opposition, to pay into the Horizon programme, which, you know, I was with Maros Sefcovic only a few weeks ago at Imperial College, seeing the excellent research collaboration at the cutting edge that is producing. What we do is we judge it on a case-by-case basis. Is it value for money, and will it deliver the jobs and growth for the British people. So we consider each one on its merits.
I know that for understandable reasons you're being coy about exactly what you're going to do, but it's clear from what you've been saying this morning, you are prepared in some circumstances to follow more EU rules, and you may be prepared in some circumstances to pay into some EU schemes because you want to be pragmatic and get a better deal. But some people listening to that might think, well, hang on a minute, you're going back on some of the things of Brexit. If we're going to be essentially closer to EU rules, having to follow more of them and having to pay, that's not what Brexit was about, is it?
Brexit was about an independent trade policy, which is exactly what this government is taking advantage of. It's about choices that we are making on our own standards with regard to the EU. But it is also about delivering, frankly, deals that the previous government and previous prime ministers post-Brexit kept promising and couldn't deliver. I remember Prime Minister Boris Johnson promising an India trade deal by Diwali. Didn't happen. He didn't say which Diwali, to be fair, but he never delivered it. We have delivered it. Keir Starmer has delivered it. Trade deal with the United States. That was something talked about in the post-Brexit years. As you know, Laura, you covered it many times against this government that's delivered it. So in terms of Brexit, it's about making Brexit work. It is about taking that independent trade policy that we have from leaving the European Union and using it to deliver for the British people. We've done it with India, we've done it with the United States, and hopefully we can do it with the EU.
Well,
but as I say, we will not sign a deal that is not our national interest.
Well, I know you've used one of the Brexit catchphrases, nothing's agreed until everything is agreed. So it would be fascinating to see what comes out tomorrow. Sir Elton John has said something rather extraordinary to us. He said that you are a government of absolute losers and he feels incredibly betrayed. Now, this is about the government's proposal to allow big tech firms to essentially ignore traditional copyright laws to use artist content online to develop their own computer programmes. How is it fair to allow huge tech giants to use the products of artists like him, but artists from this country and our successful creative industries, to take their stuff without stealing? How's that fair? Without paying, forgive me.
Look, the whole point of running a consultation on this was so that views, and very strong views, very passionate views, could be put forward. The issue here is you have two objectives. You've got, first of all, our cultural sector, which, by the way, is an extraordinary sector. Some of those wonderfully talented people in the world that provide great richness in our national life, but they also make an extraordinary contribution to our economy. And if I may say so as well, as someone who has travelled a great deal around Europe in particular in recent months, they are an extraordinary source of soft power.
And they're telling you, if you go ahead and give tech companies permission to do this, you're going to put many in our creative industries out of business.
Yeah, and that is why we have to now listen to the consultation and find a way forward that, first of all, satisfies that objective of having a thriving cultural sector. But secondly as well, and this is important too, we want to remain a world leader in AI. AI is the developing, fast emerging technology of our age. It is going to make an extraordinary difference to our lives, not least, for example, in medical diagnostics. So what the government is trying to do, just to be clear, Laura, is the government is trying to find a way forward that both is dealing with the very real concerns that are being raised and quite passionately by the culture, but also making sure that we maintain that world-leading position in AI. It's pursuing those two objectives. That's the balance we have to strike.
And it's a tricky balance, but do you think perhaps that the government might have misread the mood? I mean, Sir Elton John had told us that the Technology Secretary, Peter Kyle, who's trying to find that balance, he said he's a moron. I mean, the strength of feeling here is profound, and it's back in Parliament tomorrow. Have you misread the mood here?
Well, firstly, I profoundly disagree with that. Peter Kyle is an absolutely excellent Secretary of State who's been doing a really fantastic job since we came into office last July. But I think what it indicates is, of course, a really strong strength of feeling from the cultural sector. But the reason the process has been run in the way that it has, that we gather this evidence, we gather feeling, is precisely to allow those views to be expressed, that the government can obviously now listen to in terms of moving forward. We have to have both a thriving cultural sector, but we also need to maintain our world-leading position in AI too. OK, tricky decisions ahead for the government on that balancing technology and opportunity. Nick Thomas-Symonds, we'll let you get back to the negotiations. Thank you very much, Laura. It's good to have you with us in the studio this morning, and we'll watch, interestingly, what happens at that big summit tomorrow. And, of course, as ever, we want to know what you think about all of this. Do you think it's a good idea for the government to be pragmatic,
Or are you worried about them going back on Brexit? You can let us know. Email kuenssberg@bbc.co.uk. On social media, if you're that way inclined, you can use the hashtag BBC Laura Kay. The WhatsApp number is there, 08000 282 161. And as ever, I'll let you know what was on your mind in our newsletter that pops into your inbox every Thursday. Well, of course, this is a huge issue in Parliament, what to do about the European Union. The Tory leader, Kemi Badenoch, has already vowed to reverse any Brexit rollbacks. Her colleague, Alex Burghart, is with us again this morning. Good to have you with us in the studio. How can your leader say she's going to oppose something when we haven't seen the details yet?
Oh, look, thanks for having me on, Laura. I think one of the things that's been frustrating for us about this negotiation is that the government has been so unclear about what its red lines are and what its objectives are. And yet we understand that government can't tell us everything whilst the negotiation's going on. But if you go into a negotiation without being very clear about what you want to protect and very clear about what you want to achieve, it's very hard to get a good deal. And what Kemi has done is set out very clearly what our red lines are, and the red lines that we would stick to and the red lines that we would go back to if this government signs us up to a bad deal.
But the Conservatives have also already been calling this a surrender. I mean, is it a serious approach to be saying that publicly when, as you've just admitted, you don't know what's going to be in the deal?
So we've had a number of debates in the Commons, Laura, which I'm sure you follow very closely, where I've asked Nick Thomas-Symonds and other ministers to rule out dynamic alignment. Now, dynamic alignment is, as you were just touching on, a very, very important issue, because if you sign up to it, it means that you have to agree to all future EU regulation in the area of probably food and trade. And that means that the UK becomes a rule taker. And that was one of the things that we specifically left behind when we left the EU. When we went through the whole Brexit process, one of the things that we got out of it was that the UK could set its own regulation and chart its own course. And so because the government hasn't ruled that out, we have to assume that it's very firmly on the table and that it's about to happen. And if that is about to happen, then that is a surrender of some of Britain's sovereignty, and we won't stand for it.
But if you're watching at home and you've bored with hearing about Brexit and frustrated by the fact that politicians of all stripes made such a mess of it, what's so wrong about doing something that might bring food prices down at the supermarkets or stop food sitting rotting in a lorry because it's stuck outside a port for 8 hours?
Just as a long-term principle, the idea that if you're going to be a sovereign country, you find suddenly that you can't set your own rules ever again, and that you are obliged to follow the rules set by another power, that is just something that I think will sit very uncomfortably with people, regardless of what their original views on Brexit were. When we were in the EU, we were able to be part of the negotiations about what regulations were. We've now left the EU. We're not in that room. And so to agree to whatever that room comes up with strikes me as incredibly short-sighted.
But isn't that exactly at the root of why the Conservatives got themselves into such a problem? Because you were driven by those ideological principles rather than thinking of the practicalities of people watching at home who want lower food bills.
We were driven by the instruction that the British people gave us in the most important referendum that this country has ever had. And look, the idea as well that this is going to bring down food prices. What's driving up food prices at the moment? A combination of things. Firstly, very high energy prices, which this government said it would reverse, said it would bring everyone's energy bills down by £300. It's completely failed to do so. And secondly, because of the unprecedented taxes that this government is putting on businesses, the national insurance contributions changes, which have caused a fall in employment. We have 100,000 fewer jobs in the economy now than we had a year ago, and are putting businesses under enormous pressure and causing prices to rise, which means that we have higher inflation than we used to.
And our viewers will remember very well also the sky-high levels of inflation under the previous Conservative
Laura, they'll also remember... I can't just let you say that and not respond. The fact is...
That's the truth.
Yes, but you'll also remember... Yeah, I'm just going to respond to that, though. The point is that the whole reason we had such sky-high levels of inflation was because of the end of COVID and the start of the Ukrainian war, two factors that were totally out with the control of the last government. This government is fueling inflation. It came in and immediately granted above-inflation pay rises to all of the unionised sectors. That has had an upward tick on inflation. And yet the decisions it's made since have made things worse. The OBR was clear in its response to the budget that the government was fueling inflation. And inflation is now ticking towards 3%.
And that's something that we've discussed many times with Labour politicians. But if we stick to this notion of the European deal that the Prime Minister wants to do, don't the government actually have a mandate to do this? They said quite explicitly in their manifesto they wanted closer ties with the European Union, they wanted to reset the relationship, and that is what they're setting about doing.
They set it out in the most high-level way. I don't think the majority of people in this country want to see us go back on some of the hard-won freedoms that came out of the Brexit process, and I think that they will judge the government negatively if it does so.
Lastly, briefly, if you can, we've talked to Elton John, and we'll hear that interview in a few minutes. He's desperately concerned about the government's plans to allow AI companies to scoop up creative content. Whose side are you on, the music industry or big tech?
Well, look, the creative industry is very important to this country, and the Conservative Party put down a number of amendments to recent legislation to try and acquire some protection for artists, because it does... It obviously seems unfair if somebody is profiting from your work and you're not seeing some of the returns on that. But it has to be done in such a way that we don't stifle what is the third greatest AI economy in the world at the moment, after the US and China. We have to make sure that this country is, continues to be a hotbed for innovation.
OK, well, it's back in Parliament tomorrow and a vigorous debate on all sides. Alex Burghart, great to have you with us in the studio on Sunday as ever. Now then, I can show you what's happening right now in the Vatican. There is the first pictures of the Pope preparing to give his first Mass, Leo XIV, images that will be beamed around the world, and there'll be plenty of coverage of that across the BBC, but you can see the amazing scenes outside the glorious St. Peter's there in the heart of the Eternal City. Let's stick, though, with other European goings-on. There's a very grand European going on there. Callum, what did you make of what Nick Thomas-Symonds was telling us or not telling us about the deal he's trying to do?
You could see that Nick Thomas-Symonds was trying to shift around and really not give you many very straight answers. We can understand he's in the middle of a negotiation. What I'm troubled by is the sense that the government isn't seizing this moment in the context of a changed environment to really go further. There's huge benefit to the UK economy, and I think you were rightly pushing him on how consumers are experiencing the consequences of the deal we have, but also businesses. I speak to businesses where I live and the area that I represent, and they tell me that the red tape post the botched Brexit deal that the Tories gave us has been hugely damaging to their links to the EU. And at a time when there's great uncertainty in the world, they would like to see a restoration of clearer relationships, a removal of that red tape, and greater opportunity for them to grow their businesses.
But isn't that exactly actually what the government's trying to do? I mean, that's what Nick Thomas-Symonds was saying. They're not going to go back into the customs union, which I know the Lib Dems want, because they don't have a mandate. People didn't vote for that, and there's a huge issue with having to follow the rules. And there wouldn't have been a trade deal with India or a trade deal with the United States, such as it was if the UK was in the customs union.
Setting ourselves on an ambitious path towards a customs union is the best way to give some certainty to British businesses, and also to set and train a set of processes that would allow us to really maximise the benefit. There have been estimates this week that the UK exchequer could benefit from up to £25 billion of revenue, not even going into a customs union, but just by cutting this red tape. And at a time when Labour is struggling so much with some of the cuts that it's proposed to winter fuel payments, to disability payments, that revenue to the exchequer would give us all more choices for some better policies that were good for the country and good for people.
Nick, what did you make of it?
Laura, I felt as if I wanted to bang my head against the table here. What don't they, both sides, get? I think most of your viewers would agree. Brexit unleashed a toxicity in this country, and we both work in this.
Right in the middle of it, yeah.
And it's never been. So when you hear language like surrender, surrender of sovereignty, sell out, losing our hard-won freedoms, do they, both parties, sorry, three, do they all want to go back to how we were all at each other's throats? It was a terrible time for this country. It really was. And I don't see how this language helps. To you asked a series of very fair questions about the sort of money that they might be prepared to get back into certain facets or certain aspects. Was there an answer? No, there wasn't. How is a youth movement scheme not the same as freedom of movement? I mean, they've got to be the same. Where is there a cap? Is there a cap on numbers? Again, no answer. And as you asked about food prices, it all seems a little bit up in the air, so they've got to be so careful. And don't be surprised that your viewers, when they open their Sunday papers, you've already got the battle lines being drawn. The Sun on Sunday, the Sunday Mail on Sunday, the Sunday Express, the Sunday Telegraph, and then you've got the Observer. And I have to say, language like that they've just employed is only going to get worse, and I don't want that for Britain again.
Rosanna, you were shaking your head while Nick was speaking there. Isn't he correct that actually this creeping back in is only for the big parties going to help Nigel Farage?
Well, actually, Nick was commenting on the youth mobility scheme being the same as a freedom of movement. And that's why I was shaking my head, because we already have such a scheme with countries like Australia, New Zealand. They are for shorter prescribed periods of time. But this might be. We haven't heard the details yet. So those are only for short prescribed periods of time. And where we have growth as a centrepiece of what we want to do here in our country, and it really needs it, because I think, like, whatever side of the Brexit argument you were on,
Totally.
you could agree that our economy has been worse off. Some figures cited up to £100 billion. Ultimately, growth is important, and there are gaps in the workforce that can be plugged by the Youth Mobility Scheme. But also, I didn't do too badly for working in Germany, pulling pints when I was 18.
I just wonder, though, how worried are your colleagues? I mean, lots of Labour MPs talking to her privately about reform, beating them in the local elections. Reform, we know, are strongly Eurosceptic. How worried are you as a party about this moment being used by Reform, who seem like your biggest opponents at the moment?
I think Nick was absolutely right when he talked about the toxicity that the whole Brexit debate brought about. This is about putting the sensible hat on and saying we are in a party of government. We are the party of government. These are our biggest trading partners.
But then your colleague must answer questions,
These are
Rosa.
our
They must
allies.
answer
Sorry, Nick,
questions.
I'm just going to finish.
OK.
These are our allies against Russia. Our
Yes.
businesses are suffering. We have to do something sensible and pragmatic.
Well, sensible hats in
to-
politics,
to
who knows?
boost the economy.
It might catch on.
And Farage is
Yeah,
going to
yeah.
keep doing Farage. Let him be. We have to do what's best for the country.
I want to raise another very serious issue that we've covered very extensively on the BBC this week. What's happening in Gaza with 2 million people at risk of famine, and many people will have seen Tom Fletcher, who's a senior UN official from this country by chance, speaking very passionately at the UN this week. Your party raised this at Prime Minister's Questions this week, Callum. What do you actually want the UK government to do? Is there anything they can do?
Everyone who's looked at the scenes that are taking place in Gaza will be totally appalled and devastated by the loss of life there. Ed Davey raised it this week with Keir Starmer because he's calling on the government to go further and to do more. Keir Starmer hasn't raised it with, as far as we know, with Donald Trump directly. It's clear that Donald Trump is the one person who may have some influence over Netanyahu. And what we need is we need the aid in, we need the hostages out, and we strongly believe we also need the recognition of the state of Palestine. At the moment, we have a situation where extremists in the Israeli cabinet are advocating for the annexation of the West Bank and the destruction of the whole of Gaza. It's time for the UK government, jointly with France ideally, to recognise Palestine.
And Rosanna, as a doctor, you've actually worked in Gaza some years back, and I know you were at the border, I think, last year. When you see what's going on there, what do you want your party to do?
Laura, we need to be really clear here. Food is being used as a weapon of war. There are 1 million people facing starvation. We have children who have already died from having food withheld. We have a moral responsibility to act, and if we don't act immediately, this will be on us. No one can say that we didn't see this coming. Tom Fletcher spoke very passionately this week, and if you have ever, like I have, seen what a starving child looks like, there are things we can do. There should be a global coordinated effort. This isn't just the responsibility of the UK government. But what we can do as a government is we can impose sanctions on Israeli government officials. We can also stop selling arms of any forms, parts, arms, whatever, to the Israeli government. And we should be revisiting our free trade deal with Israel.
Nick, the government, though, has been reluctant to take those steps that Rosanna has outlined. And do you think that the UK actually can make a difference in this situation?
Not on its own, no. And I think this is a time where, and America voted the way America did, I don't know how helpful it is to have a president, the sort of president we have in the White House now, where it's almost whiplash. We're going one way at night and we wake up and the next morning we're going the other way. To Rosanna's point, she's absolutely right. But I hope you would agree that this has to be on both sides. That the Hamas-run authorities also have to come. We need to have an honest broker, and this is so easy sitting in a London studio on a Sunday morning, but we need an honest broker who can get to both sides, talks in Qatar or wherever they...
Without a doubt.
Right. I mean, it is on both sides, that's all I would say.
Without a doubt, there has to be a ceasefire. Without a doubt, there has to be the return of hostages. But let's be clear.
Yes,
let's be clear. It is not proportionate retaliation. Let's be clear that the rules of engagement have been change to such a way that we will no longer recognise global wars if this is allowed to go unchecked, unpunished.
And Callum, briefly, do you as a party think that Israel is breaking international law? The government won't say that yet. They've said the same thing again and again for many months. It's at risk of breaking international law. Is it the Lib Dems' view that that is happening?
Tom Fletcher couldn't have been more clear in his statement to the UN Security Council that the crimes of preventing food aid into a population and preventing that population en masse from accessing humanitarian relief is in contravention of international law.
The only crime that these children have committed is being born in Palestine.
OK, well, all three of you, thank you very much indeed. And it's an important conversation to have about what's happening in Gaza. OK, we are going to turn to a different subject now. We're going to talk about net zero and energy, because it's not just a fraught issue for everyone at home when you're looking at your bills, or for business wondering how to pay their huge bills while at the same time moving across to greener fuels. One of the biggest energy companies in the UK is Centrica, which owns British Gas and generates huge amounts of power for the country. But there's a warning from its boss. Chris O'Shea told me in the middle of the North Sea that they won't be able to keep its gas storage facility open unless the government underwrites its investments. The platform, Rough, sits 18 miles off the coast of East Yorkshire, and it provides up to half of the country's storage capacity under the seabed in a gas field the size of central London. Now, at this time of year, they would normally be filling up the tanks to be ready for next winter. But Centrica says without government stepping in, the sums do not add up.
This is like a big battery. So this is when, I mean, today's quite windy. You can see, we've got a bit of wind here. And as we were coming, we saw wind farms done. So we've got a good amount of renewable electricity. I think more than 50% today is coming from renewables. But there are some days where that can be down at 5 or 10 or 15%. That's the day you need a facility like Rough, where we take gas out, we put it through power stations or hydrogen in the future, and we keep the lights on when the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine. This is 40 years old, so it needs to be replaced because we want it to last for another 40 years. We'll replace all of the kit that you see, we'll build a new pipeline, we'll build a new terminal onshore, and we will design this so that it's the key underpin for the UK's hydrogen economy. It will be able to store hydrogen. It can become the world's single largest hydrogen storage facility. But we'll design it in a way that it's not reliant upon hydrogen, it can store natural gas, so it can do what it's doing just now, and then it can convert to hydrogen at some point in the future.
And what is it that, at the moment, you are hoping the government will do?
So we're not asking for anything new, we're not asking for anything that doesn't exist just now, we're not asking for any government money. What we're asking for is simply for the government to help create the conditions which will unlock £2 billion of investment. It will create thousands of jobs in the construction phase, and it will safeguard the jobs of very highly skilled colleagues that are offshore just now.
But why should the taxpayer and government step in? I mean, Centrica's a huge business, you've got your own deep pockets.
It's a bit like if you go into a supermarket during COVID, there was a big problem with toilet rolls. You go into the supermarket, there's one packet of toilet rolls, you'll pay whatever they want to get those toilet rolls. But if you know the shop down the road has got toilet rolls, you'll just walk out and go to the other shop. Rough works a bit like that. If you know that there's gas in storage, the gas market price won't go as high. So there's a huge saving to consumers of having this facility open.
But isn't it for you, as a very big business, to sort that out? Why is it for government?
We are a big business, but this asset will lose probably £100 million this year, because the cost of running it is over £100 million. And if you can't see any return, so if we were to simply spend £2 billion redeveloping this field and the summer-winter gas price stays the same, then we will lose that £2 billion and we'll lose the cost of operating the facility. It's just not sustainable.
Well, if this doesn't happen and the government doesn't give you what you want, what is the future of this place then?
So inevitably what will happen is that this asset will be decommissioned. So what you see here will be shut down, and we'll remove everything that we've got here, we'll make it like it was never here, and we'll lose this resilience. And today the UK, I mean, if you look over to the continent, we've got Germany, France, the Netherlands, they've each got more than 100 days of gas storage. We've got 12 days just now in the UK. So 12 days of gas storage. Rough provides 6. So if we don't have Rough anymore, then we go down to 6 days. Now, if we take Rough to full capacity, we will go up to about 25 or 30 days.
You wrote this week, actually, it's misleading when people are told in sound bites that renewables cut their bills. You said you were frustrated.
Yeah. So what I feel is, so decarbonisation is so important. The energy transition is a huge economic opportunity. And so the thing that frustrates me is that we will have people that will give sound bites but it might not be backed up by fact. And you see that this becoming, it's a left versus right thing. It's I'm pro net zero or I'm anti net zero. And what I really want is I want to give people all of the information that they need to make an informed decision. There is nobody that's more keen on decarbonisation than I am. The question is how we get there, and the question is what does it cost? So what we need is an energy system which is clean, that's resilient, and it's always available, and it's affordable. If we have a clean energy system that people can't afford to pay their bills, we will have failed. If we have a clean energy system and it's not reliable, we'll have failed. But if we continue with fossil fuels, the damage we're doing to the planet means we'll have failed.
But when politicians, including the Prime Minister, then tell people, we'll bring in more green energy, that will cut your bills, that's misleading.
So I think that you have to ask the Prime Minister exactly what he means by that, but I think you could make an argument that if you make everything green, that might be cheaper than if you were to build new fossil fuel power stations. Now the question is, that's all predicated on a bunch of assumptions. So the only point I'm making is that the price we see today for electricity is the same as the price that we're given to new renewable developments. Therefore, that new renewable development will not bring down the price.
You were perhaps admirably honest about your own pay a few years ago. You said it was hard to justify, but a couple of weeks ago, a huge group of your shareholders said they didn't want you to have a pay rise. What do you say to that when also so many people are watching and can't afford to pay their energy bills?
Look, I think it's really difficult. I am unbelievably fortunate. I have a job where the market rate is more than I ever thought I would earn. You know, I didn't expect to be in the position that I'm in. I spent the first 10 years of my life in a council estate in Fife, a place called Glenrothes. I didn't know anyone going to university, so I'm unbelievably lucky. I didn't expect to be here.
You don't have to take it.
I don't set my own pay. A number of us don't set our own pay, and we earn so much more than the average person. And I think that it's not just energy debt, as you talk about, it's people that struggle to pay for food, it's people that struggle to pay for rent, it's people that struggle to pay their mortgage. I think we've got to, and one of the reasons I like to work closely with government is to figure out how do we close this inequality gap.
Just a couple of final quick things. Is the government's target of clean energy by 2030, which is only 5 years away, is that realistic?
I think it's very challenging, but I think it's right that the Energy Secretary has set a very stretching target. It's a bit like I think about when I do things in Centrica. You know, I set stretching targets for our people. So it's not easy, but it's not impossible.
It's not impossible.
It's not impossible, no, but it's not easy. So I can't say hand on heart we'll get there. But I think if we all pull in the same direction, it's possible. The reality is it might not be just where we want to be by 2030, but probably by having a very stretching target, we'll be a lot closer than we would otherwise have been.
And do you have concerns about how the transition is being handled, particularly in the North Sea? You know, if you go to Aberdeen, anyone you bump into in the street in Aberdeen would tell you that it's happening too fast, that people are losing jobs, that move away from fossil fuel production in the North Sea, you know, where we're standing today is happening too quickly and there's a big cost. Do you worry about the pace of change?
So the question is not whether we have generation after generation after generation going into fossil fuels. I mean, fossil fuels are clearly going to be phased out. The question is, how do we take that amazing skilled workforce and retrain them so that they can work on the energy of the future? I mean, we're looking at this big gas field just now. Well, this is part of the future, it's a big hydrogen field. You know, hydrogen is key to decarbonisation. People have been here 10, 15, 20 years. Hopefully they'll be working another 10, 15, 20 years on hydrogen. So I think there is something about, we've got to be really careful. I mean, when I grew up in Fife, there was, I watched the miners' strike, I watched the coalfields, and I watched communities, that's the word, losing their primary source of income and like nothing replaced it. So I do think we've got to be really careful of that.
Okay, great. Chris, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you for speaking to us.
Well, the government said the future of Rough is a commercial decision for Centrica, but they're open to discussing proposals. They said clean power plans will deliver a more secure energy system, which could lower bills. Now, you might remember in January we met Sir Paul McCartney, desperately worried that the government was about to bend over backwards to tech companies to let them use creatives' content online for free. That argument is now raging, and Sir Elton John has joined the fight. Last week, the government kicked out plans from the House of Lords to force AI companies to tell everyone what they're using, to be transparent. There'll be another vote in the Lords tomorrow, but it's shaping up to be a huge fight between rock royalty, tech bros and British ministers. Neither Sir Elton nor the playwright James Graham, speaking alongside him, are mincing their words about what it would mean in their view if the plans go ahead.
Well, they'd be committing theft, thievery on the highest scale. And for young people, or for everyone who's creative, the fact that AI could run rampant without, you have to ask for approval and you have to have transparency. It's quite simple. If someone wants to use your song, ask, and then you have to have the transparency and how is it being used. That's fine. But the danger is for young artists, they haven't got the resources to keep checking or fight big tech if there is a lawsuit or anything like that. It's criminal, and I feel incredibly betrayed. The House of Lords did a vote, and it was more than 2-1 in our favour. The government just looked at it as if to say, well, the old people like me can afford it. That's not what we're complaining about. We're complaining about people's legacy, whether they're young songwriters, whether they're young playwrights, journalists, whatever. Some people aren't like me. They don't earn as much as I do, but when they're creative and it comes from the human soul and not a machine, because a machine isn't capable of writing anything with any soul in it. If you've got to get rid of that and you're going to rob young people of their legacy and their income, it's a criminal offence, I think. I think the government are just being absolute losers, and I'm very angry about it, as you can tell. Big tech has so much money, and if you're a young person, you're fighting big tech, good luck. I want the government to see sense. I want it to come back on our side, because if they don't, I'm going to feel like a suffragette. The Derby's coming up soon, right? It's just, but it's really disrespectful. It's really disheartening. I supported the government. I did a thing for them at St Paul's Cathedral when Keir Starmer said, "I want to help young people in the music business. I want to support them." Well, he's not doing it, and I did that show, and I did it because I believed, but I'm not believing so much now.
And if the government continues to stick their fingers in their ears, what are you prepared to do? I mean, you said it was the Derby coming up, but are you not just as one of the most successful songwriters of all time?
We'll fight all the way, Laura. I mean, if it takes going to the court or whatever, we will fight this. And the government are being so stupid. I don't know who the tech minister is. What's his name?
Peter Kyle.
Yeah. Well, he's a bit of a moron. Sorry.
James, for the next generation of creatives then, what does it mean to you?
Exactly as Elton said, this isn't about successful existing artists gatekeeping or protecting their own royalties. It's a really, really tough time in the creative industries at the moment. Most writers, musicians, actors aren't famous and aren't rich. They're just trying to get by in their tens and thousands. But so many are leaving in the industry because it is an incredibly tough time. This advancement into the digital space and the online space is not benefiting the artists and hasn't traditionally. And therefore it's not benefiting consumers and citizens as well. And exactly as Elton said, it's not about denying the existence of AI. Look, this is here, we know it's definitely going to happen. And there are hundreds of benefits, I'm sure, to many industries and possibly even to
we're
the
not anti-AI, but when it comes to music, like this, we are.
And how do you see this battle? Is it, capitalism versus creatives, or is it all about tech bros versus the traditions that we've had for so long?
Well, the government said we're going to overturn this because of financial privilege. That answers your question.
It's money.
Carrying on from what James said, I mean, a machine can't create anything. It can, but it doesn't have a soul, it doesn't have a heart, it doesn't have human feeling, it doesn't have passion. What machines have passion? Human beings, when they create something, are doing it, they're believing what they're creating is something good. Whether it's good or not, it doesn't matter. They're trying to create something that will bring pleasure to lots of people. Machines are incapable of doing that.
But do you really think that the UK government would be strong enough, if they take your side, to make Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg pay?
Well, if they take it's no good putting a Biba Doobie song, for example, and put it into a computer saying, write me a song like Biba Doobie, or write me an article like Marina Hyde from The Guardian. That is it's just horrible. It's George Orwell times 1,000. The government have no right to do this to my songs. They have no right to do it to anybody's songs, anybody's prose, anybody's journalism, anybody's creative ability. They have no right to sell us down the river. And this is what they're doing.
And if Keir Starmer was sitting in this seat, what would you say to him today?
Wise up.
And if he doesn't, what would you do? March on number 10? I mean, I can tell how furious, how worried you are about this.
Well, let's cross that bridge when we come to it. Let's be hopeful and that the government does see sense. I'm always here to talk. I mean, I've been a supporter of his. He can pick up the phone. We can have a cup of coffee. It's always better to solve things face to face. But we have to fight our corner. And I want to say again to the House of Lords, brilliant. Well done. You've supported us and you've got another vote coming. We're thrilled that people get it. And it's about time the government got it.
And what's interesting is, I mean, I've seen, I mean, I know I've seen firsthand the value that I think people like Keir Starmer and even Peter Kyle, who is, you know, I've been very grateful. They've come to see a lot of my plays. I know that they do understand the value of creativity, both to the economy, but also to the soul of a nation, to social cohesion, to getting rid of social isolation, and to celebrating British stories, which still remains one of the most celebrated things around the world that we do. I think they do understand that and they do get it. But what's frustrating is the either the complacency or the willingness to let Silicon Valley tech bros get it all their own way.
Big checkbook. And every young artist I've talked to isn't interested in AI. They're interested in writing their own things. And let's put this into perspective. We're not against AI. AI can do wonderful things. But when it comes to music and creativity, let's draw a line here, please.
Sir Elton, it's rare that we get the opportunity to talk to you, so I know people will also want to know what you are up to next after such an enormously successful career, giving people so much joy. I know you two have worked together on musicals before. Would you be up for it? Or James, are you trying to persuade him?
Another musical?
Yeah.
But the thing is, I really enjoy writing musicals, and every one I've written, I've really enjoyed, including Tammy Faye, which we wrote together. The thing is, from the first initial thought of the germ of the idea, it really takes about 8 years to 10 years to come into fruition. And I'm at the point in my life now where I'm not interested in waiting that long. We have Devil Wears Prada and Lion King with the #1 and 2 musicals in Britain at the moment, so I'm very happy with that.
And can you feel the love tonight? It is where we are. It's enough for this wide-eyed wanderer.
I love writing musicals, but the thing is, I'm 78 and it's a lot of hard work. He will testify to that. He has to do the rewrites, I don't.
You are still, though, producing huge amounts. Another #1 album, your 10th #1 album with the American artist and your great friend, Brandy Carlisle. Are you suggesting there that you might be starting to scale back, starting to pull back?
No. I will obviously make more records, and I have my boys to look after and be with. There's so much to do. I'm really glad I'm not touring, I will tell you that. I have no wish to travel. I have no wish to constantly travel, but my life is such now that you know, I can reap the benefits of what I've done and also continue to do my radio shows which support young artists. That's really the crux of the matter for me. It's really important to help young artists on my radio show, get to know them, meet them. And this is basically coming back to what this is. This isn't about me particularly or Paul McCartney. This is about young people who are just starting out.
I must ask, as we're talking on the day of Eurovision, which is a massive musical event and many people listening to all sorts of music, our viewers will want to know, Sir Elton, do you think Eurovision is more than a bit of fun? And does Elton John watch the Eurovision Song Contest?
I have never watched the Eurovision Song Contest, mainly because in the past I've never been here. I've always been working. It's not on my radar particularly. It's a bit of fun and that's what it is. And people love it, they throw parties. And there's nothing wrong with that, no. It's great fun for them, good.
But it's never going to be part of your routine.
Oh, I did write a song for Eurovision once when Lulu was the artist and she did Boom 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 Bang Bang. I had a song in the last 6 called I Can't Go On Living Without You, which luckily failed to make the grade. But I have been involved in Eurovision before. And back then it was more it's turned into a kind of novelty dress-up thing now, and it's more fun. In the old days, it was Teddy Johnson and Pearl Carr and Sing Little Birdie. So I think it's a little bit more fun now.
Well, Boom Bang a Bang, perhaps one of the Eurovision classics that actually survives as a song that people have heard of. Sir Elton and James Graham, thank you so much for giving us the time today.
Thank you so much for coming down. Bless you.
Thank you.
It's a huge pleasure. Thank you so much. Well, the definition of a class act. What a huge privilege it was to talk to Sir Elton John. Nick, do you think that the government's actually got themselves in a bit of a pickle here? Because this debate's been going on for quite a long time and it's really hotting up.
Well, Elton and James aren't making their minds up, are they? Just to keep that going. Again, I'm going to look at the language. Before you even had your first question, we heard from Sir Elton that it's theft. AI is running rampant. There's a danger. Fighting big tech. It's criminal. They are absolute losers. It's disrespectful. This is a man who crafts his whole living is with words, and he's absolutely right. The House of Lords, I think, has done the nation a great service. And I do think that they need, again, we should listen to people like James. We should listen to people like Sir Elton, because I cannot see the argument against it. Although we probably need to point out, Peter Kyle thought Elton lost his way after the Yellow Brick Road album. No, I'm only kidding. I'm only kidding, having been called a moron.
But, Rosanna, there are, though, huge opportunities in AI. And also, when it comes to creative content online, it's there anyway. Can any government actually stop this happening? And, you know, maybe if Minister's got a point, they're trying to get AI companies to come here to help the economy grow.
Well, I certainly think that the Rocket Man put a rocket up the government in that interview, Laura.
It's like panorama around this table now.
I'm feeling the pressure.
Are you feeling the love tonight?
All right, that is a cease and desist. Rosanna, what is the government going to do? Right, they are kind of, it seems from the outside, they're quite stuck here.
Well, look, of course AI is important, and I'm pleased that the government are looking at pushing forward with initiatives. But I'm really clear, we have to protect our creatives. Ultimately, these people, and many of them are young, emerging artists, they have got skills that the rest of us would only ever dream of having. And to strip them of their opportunity to earn a living, I really hope that the government have heard this loud and clear. I really believe they will have, particularly after this interview. But actually, I've actually written to the government to ask that creatives could have the opportunity to opt in to have their work used rather than have to opt out.
Interesting. So some disquiet on the Labour backbenches as well about it. Callum, what's the Lib Dems' position on this?
So we strongly supported and indeed led some of these amendments in the House of Lords
that
Elton John referred to, and we voted for them in the Commons this week. It was interesting that Thomas-Symonds earlier on said there was a consultation there. The consultation hasn't actually closed, and my concern is that the government and ministers, some of whom I don't know well enough to call a moron, are not listening to that consultation, and I hope that they're listening as closely to the creative sector as they clearly are to the AI industry. And I'd really encourage Rosanna and colleagues, when we have the kind of ping-pong we're likely to have with these amendments this week, to come back and vote for the transparency and for the opt-out that would allow to make sure that the creatives are protected in their work.
Well, it's a really interesting debate and sign of our times. Dilemmas and opportunities for government when it comes to technology. It's been great to have you guys with us today. Now, Sir Elton might not be that much of a devotee, but I do know that lots of you are. For the third year in a row, we are meeting the morning after the Eurovision night before.
This is London Calling.
And I'm pleased to say disco queen Sophie Ellis-Bextor has followed what feels now like something of a tradition. Catherine Tate and then Joanna Lumley were the British point scorers in the last couple of years, and they sent us their post-show verdicts. And this year, Sophie was a good sport too.
Hello, Laura. Greetings from Eurovision HQ over here, spokesperson from London Calling. It's been amazing. I adore Eurovision, and yeah, I've just had a ball. I've got to really bed in with the whole thing this year, and I can't believe I got to do the iconic London Calling. 12 points goes to 9. Happy. Just knocked some of the equipment. I have had a ball, and I'm off to go and have some champagne. And congratulations to the winner.
Very well-deserved champagne for Sophie Ellis-Bextor, and huge thanks to her for sending us her selfie video. Thank you to my team at the desk for the last 60 minutes. Thank you to all of our guests on the programme today. And as ever, most of all, thank you to you at home for spending your Sunday morning with us. We've covered a lot of ground today ahead of a big day for Keir Starmer tomorrow. As ever, don't forget to let us know what is on your mind, and I'll be in touch with our newsletter on Thursday. You can find out how to sign up for that online. And I'll be joining Eurovision fanatic, the one and only Paddy O'Connell, for Sunday's newscast in a while. You can can join both of us on BBC Sounds later and find out if his predictions for the contest were wrong or right. And of course, I'll look forward very much to seeing you here next Sunday, same time, same place.